This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 538, entitled Feminists Who Remain Monoconscious Lose Out. Description. This flyer states that those feminists who remain monoconscious will be less likely to find a boyfriend and to keep one, given the growing competition coming from the biconscious feminists. This competition will cause a virtuous circle to be established, in which the more biconscious feminists there are, the stronger the pressure on monoconscious feminists will be to convert themselves into becoming biconscious. Flow itself. Feminists who remain monoconscious lose out, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer claims that if feminists remain monoconscious, they will lose out in either of two ways, that is, in getting a man and in keeping their man. Monoconscious feminists will lose out to biconscious feminists in getting a man, and monoconscious feminists will lose their boyfriends to masculism, as masculists target these currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends/husbands/partners, teaching them masculist ideas that will convert these currently monoconscious male feminists to becoming biconscious, which will cause them to see the monoconsciousness of their feminist girlfriends as bigoted, so they become disgusted with their monoconscious girlfriends and dump them. How will monoconscious feminists lose out in getting a boyfriend to the biconscious feminists? Nearly all feminists have boyfriends, since they are heterosexual and hence dependent on men for their sex. This is inevitable, since 99.5% of women are heterosexual. Only 1 woman in 200 is lesbian. So, despite the fact that most monoconscious feminists are rather feminazi bitchy towards men, in brackets, because they are angry at men for the ways that men oppress women, which is what feminism teaches them for the past 6 decades, close brackets, these women have to make an effort to be nice enough to men if they are to get a boyfriend at all. If a monoconscious feminist is feminazi bitchy to her potential boyfriend's face, then he will just walk away, sneering at her. So if she wants to be penist at all and have a relationship with him, then she has to be nice to the man she fancies sexually and wants to have a relationship with. But she is a monoconscious feminist, so is ideologically committed to the idea that men are the oppressors of women, which is what feminism has taught her all her young life. So she is conflicted. At the back of her mind is the notion that men are pigs, men are rapists, men are toxic, etc., which is the feminist religion that she lives by. This schizophrenia manifests itself periodically, especially when the couple has a verbally violent argument. Then out comes the monoconscious feminazi misandry, and the man cannot fail to notice it and resents it. He does not like being put down simply on the basis of his gender that he had no choice about having. His maleness was the result of the fall of the genetic dice. Now jump a few years into the future and assume that masculinist ideas have spread far and wide, well into the culture, so that just about everyone, certainly intelligent, educated people, know about them, and for both sexes. Since millions of women will also have learned masculine ideas, there will be millions of biconscious feminists who are as familiar with masculine ideas as they are of feminist ideas. So we'll understand that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that women oppress men badly too. For example, with women's manslavery, women's forced fatherhood, women's butchery of fathers in the divorce courts, etc. So these biconscious feminists will think to themselves, ad-libbing now, for quite a while, I will now be in female voice, pretending I'm female. So, quote,
I don't have the right to be monoconsciously bitchy to men the way I was before I learned any masculism, because women are at least as bad at gender oppressing as men are. As the masculists have taught me, even rape is small beer in comparison to the decades-lasting manslavery of several billion fluffies around the world. So I lost my monoconscious anger at men. It was cancelled due to my knowledge of how women oppress men, and arguably worse than vice versa, because many of women's gender crimes against men last decades, which makes them more serious than men's gender crimes against women. So I have lost my monoconscious feminist anger at men and see men now in a much more favourable light. I empathise with men for their suffering in the fluffy feminist controlled divorce courts. Men are man-slaves to billions of fluffies who don't bother to become career competent, so these men work for these fluffies for decades of their lives. Men don't have the para, that's paternity rejection right, while we women do have the mara, maternity rejection right, which is so obviously sexist and unfair, so millions of men are forced into an unwanted pregnancy. That is, they become forced fathers. So I find myself, since I became biconscious, being much nicer to men, more approachable by men, and it makes a difference. My natural feminine instinct is now much freer to express itself with men, and I notice that men really appreciate my newfound nurturing. They really like it. So I find it easier to find boyfriends who appreciate very much my nurturing of them. They tell me that it reminds them of when they were small with their mothers and felt adored. I understand that. I also understand that this gives me an advantage over traditional monoconscious feminists, as I used to be in a previous life. As a monoconscious feminist, I used to be rather cynical and distrustful of men, since feminism taught me how men oppress women, and that made me angry at men, especially for men's raping of women, men's wars, etc. I'm sure that soured some of my relationships I had with men in the monoconscious feminist phase of my life. Now that I'm biconscious, I'm much less cynical and more empathetic with men and the masculists. I call myself a female masculist now, since I understand what the masculists are talking about, complaining bitterly about how women oppress men for the reasons they give. These complaints are valid. The manslavery, the forced fathering, the butchery in the divorce courts, etc. These are very real problems that society will have to solve. I agree with the masculists and support them. I find that my female masculism makes my dating life much easier. men sense that I'm sympathetic to the masculist cause and that I'm not just pretending to be nice to men the way monoconscious feminists are, just to get penised and have a relationship of some sort. I used to be like that, feeling rather torn between my need for a man's penis and his attention on the one hand, and my monoconscious anger at him for being a man, and hence the oppressor sex on the other hand. That's all gone now, so my feelings towards men are now much more sincere. I have a real empathy towards men now, and men notice it, and that is to my benefit.
End quote. So this one biconscious feminist is found to be much nicer and approachable by men. So she is approached by men and is more likely to have a boyfriend who appreciates her greater degree of nurturing than would come from a monoconscious feminist. Now multiply this situation by millions and you get a social phenomenon in which millions of monoconscious feminists start noticing that the quality men, the type of men these monoconscious feminists really want to have relationships with and to sex with, are clearly preferring the biconscious feminists. Articles and TV programs, blogs, etc. are now appearing, written by biconscious feminists, that men are a lot more attracted to biconscious feminists than to monoconscious feminists, since the latter are still feminazi bitchy towards men and hence are a lot less attractive to men. So men tend to reject them as inferior female companions and bedmates. As the number of biconscious feminists grows and grows, the monoconscious feminists will really start feeling the competition for quality men exerted by the biconscious feminists. In many cases, a monoconscious feminist will be told to her face by some man that he does not date monoconscious feminists, since they are sexist bigots who still believe the old feminist dogma that gender oppression is a one-way street. Monoconscious feminists will increasingly be feeling the heat on them coming from biconscious feminists, from men, and from the society as a whole, that monoconscious feminism is now uncompetitive in terms of a woman's ability to attract a man. So society is teaching these monoconscious feminists that if they want to attract a man, it is in their self-interest to convert themselves into becoming biconscious, which means in practice that they have to learn some masculism, since biconscious means, by definition, that one has had both one's feminist and one's masculist consciousness raised. So we have here a virtuous circle established. The greater the number of biconscious feminists, the faster their number grows, since the more there are, the greater the pressure on the monoconscious feminists to convert themselves to being biconscious. This process continues until saturation, in which nearly all women are biconscious. Now, back to the other major case, that is, of a woman trying to keep her boyfriend. Masculists are fed up with a misandry of feminazi cunts who lash out at men for the ways that men oppress women, while remaining oblivious to the fact, as seen clearly by masculists, that women in fact oppress men worse with their many decades-lasting gender crimes against men. So masculists are fed up with the monoconscious bigotry of these monoconscious feminists and despise them. So, as masculinist ideas spread, masculists in their great number will be in a much stronger position to spread masculinist ideas to the currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends of monoconscious feminist girlfriends, converting these boyfriends into biconscious masculists, who will then start looking at their monoconscious feminist girlfriends in a new light, seeing the monoconscious views of their girlfriends as bigoted and one-sided. Hold on. Right. My cursor's not, what the hell? My cursor's not moving.